Oh, hello.
One,
I've used
one.
I've used Craig before and he always scares me. We're fine. It's
Welcome,
fine. It's fine.
welcome, welcome back to. We're keeping this in now. Welcome back to Dollars and Dragons. Today I have with me Nala. If you'd like to introduce yourself, Nala.
Hi everyone. My name is Nala or Jay. I go by both. My pronouns are they them. I am on Twitter at NalaWoo and at NalaDraws if you'd like to see my art. I am a professional illustrator and art director working full-time in TTRPGs. Besides art, I'm also a voice actor, sensitivity reader, and cultural consultant, TTRPG content creator, and professional actual play stream performer. And I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, great to have you. I am actually super excited to have you on. My community knows you as the artist in my server. I have just the one artist. If you commission Nala for a portrait for your character or whatever, you get a free session from me. And that's something that we started doing, I guess, last year, right? It's been like 6 months, isn't it? Since like you started like taking those commissions here and there.
Yeah, that
Over
sounds
the
about right.
summer. Over the
Time is
summer, right?
soup. Yeah,
Yeah,
time
time
is
is a
soup.
word. Yeah, time is a word soup. That's true. Okay, now I have to ask this question that I didn't tell you that I was going to ask you. You were really confused when I first started reaching out to you, weren't you? And like you just didn't know like, hey, what's the angle here, right?
Yeah, just a little.
Who's this white person DMing me right now?
Well, like, because I didn't know who you were,
Uh-huh.
and I think you were fairly new to Twitter at that point too,
Mhm.
and I was just kind of like, I didn't have like many mutuals with you either. Like when I get new clients, I will definitely just kind of like check them out online, see who they are, because I don't want to take work from people who are bad for whatever reason. So I'll usually scope out the Twitter, check the likes, do the normal vetting stuff. If I have mutuals with them, that's an automatic plus. Or I scroll through their likes or their retweets, see sort of the kinds of opinions and stuff that they interact with, and yeah. So it's and I was just kind of like I didn't know what exactly you were looking for. And it's kind of funny because I explain this to my friends sometimes because I will just talk about like, oh, I'm doing a portrait for this one thing that I have, and my friends have joked, you've been adopted by a person. This is kind of like back in ye old times when like rich people would like pick an artist and just have them on retainer and then like just get them to draw whatever they wanted. I'm like, that's basically what it is.
Yeah, you're the community artist here for my Discord, yeah. And my community has grown quite a bit since then. And of course, like I guess my presence online and everything. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I fully disqualify myself from so many jobs and so many opportunities because of my Twitter presence sometimes. But I'm just like, okay, whatever. Because I know that I don't have a super polished like corporate social media profile. Maybe if I end up working for a corporate, I'm in the process of interviewing for someone right now. But maybe if that happens, I'll have to get serious on Twitter. But as of right now, it's just like a mess of me just being a trans disaster. And my players already experience like who I am. Like if you join my game, that's part of the experience. That's part of what you pay for, in my opinion. I can kind of see like my bed that's unmade right here in the corner of my camera. The viewers can't see that though.
It's a secret.
The listeners, yeah. But enough about my sex life. That's not what the podcast is about. Um, if we pivot to what was it like being a freelancer while you were still in college, and when did you graduate and all that stuff? Like when did you start taking work as a freelancer?
Yeah, so I officially graduated in the fall of 2021 from the Savannah College of Art and Design. I got a BFA in illustration with a concentration in concept design and visual development for animated films and games. And I didn't walk because they only do one graduation ceremony a year. And since I missed my graduation ceremony the previous spring, because I was supposed to walk spring 2021, I missed that one. So I didn't walk until spring 2022. But I started doing freelance work in the tabletop space around spring of 2019, I think is when I sort of joined Twitter. And I started taking work I think that fall it must have been. And it was difficult because I was a full time student and going to art school, juggling all of my class projects and the illustrations that I had to make for class, as well as these freelance requests. And it unfortunately resulted in me having to turn down work, which was really sad. Because I definitely was missing out on some opportunities that I would have really liked to take. But by the end of my time in school, I was really learning the value of work life balance and learning about, not overloading myself with work, because burnout is every artist's worst enemy besides maybe carpal tunnel. But if we take that as like the mental enemy and the physical enemy, those are the two BBEGs of artists, in my opinion, is burnout and carpal tunnel. So I was definitely learning that the hard way, with some of my classes just having like a crap ton of work, and deadlines piling up and all of that because, I have ADHD, and that makes doing freelance work more challenging, I think, than neurotypical folks. Because I struggle with executive dysfunction and all of those other things that I've had to learn methods and tricks to keep myself on task, and to get all my work done on time, which I've been pretty successful in doing. So that's really cool. But it's definitely been a learning curve. But some of my professors were gracious enough to let me turn in my freelance work for class. They were willing to stretch the rules and the prompts a little so that I could turn in my freelance work for class and basically essentially double dip in that I was getting class credit for my work, but then I also was getting paid for it and it was going to get published. And my professors were really great about that, and they were very cool about it because they were generally very proud of me for getting work while I was still in school, and they were just kind of like, any real world experience is going to beat whatever I can teach you. I remember one of my professors specifically saying that when I was like really nervous to be like, hey, I just got a job. Is it possible I could turn this in? And yeah, so I had some professors who were very, very cool about that, especially because I was starting to get work around the time that I was in a bunch of classes where a lot of the projects were self-guided anyways. So I just had to pitch it to the professor and be like, can I do this? And they're all like, yeah, cool. And then I had to do the little song and dance talking to my art directors and being like, hey, I know I signed an NDA. Would I be able to turn in this project for class? Like I can like not tell them what it's for, like, where in this NDA can I sort of walk this line? And my art directors were also all very, very cool about it because they were like, yes, like absolutely, you can turn this in. And they weren't even like super stringent on like, you can't say what this is for. Like they were pretty chill about it because they also saw that as a learning opportunity for my classmates, just to see like, oh, this is, what actually working with the client is like. And they were happy to let me do that. So that was really cool.
Yeah, I could see how that would be nerve-wracking to just approach your art director and be like, "Hey, I'm a literal child. Can I turn this in for
Not a
schoolwork?"
child, but I'm still in school right now. Yeah, I was definitely worried about coming across as like unprofessional, but I think they were just kind of like they were really chill about it. So that was really nice.
Yeah, that's super sweet. I love that. I think back to when I was starting writing and I was, turning stuff in for my I don't know, like English, creative, whatever, at the time. And of course, those sort of creative writing classes and those courses and stuff are very limited for just a standard English class. You have to take a specific class to really get that sort of experience. And I remember when I was in sixth or seventh grade writing like the most terrible conglomeration of like Suikoden and like Wheel of Time and like all these other influences as my first like piece of work. And I got accused of plagiarism because I was a student with an F in English because I never paid attention, but I read all the time. And I was like, this was my first, it eventually translated into me like creating. And then I think a year later, I turned into that like same teacher, like, here is my word vomit of 80,000 words as like an eighth grader. and they were like, "This is amazing that you have written this much. I don't care if this is good or not. This is amazing." So, and then me
I have
off and on.
a very funny story,
Go
which I
ahead.
will keep short. I've been working on a fantasy setting, which now is a science fantasy setting. I will link it to you.
Uh-huh.
My pitch deck. This was SCAD doesn't do thesis projects for illustration students, which always irked me because I would have loved to do a thesis. But if I had done a thesis, this would have been like the body of work that I did for this would have been my thesis if we had had one officially.
Mm-hmm.
But this fantasy setting, which the working name is Arumbai, I started working on in like 2015 or 2016. Like it's been yeah, it was about 2015. I started working on that back in high school. And this whole thing came about because prior to making this setting, I was writing fan fiction for Frozen, the Disney movie. And there exists online an entire novel's worth of Frozen fan fiction that I wrote. And I changed like pretty much everything about the characters, about the story. Like the pretty much like the names were like the only thing that was like the same. And then at one point I realized like this is my own creation. Like I created my own whole characters and story. And, you know, maybe I should make this not fan fiction. So I took those characters and the personalities that I developed and I started creating my own thing. And that was actually what inspired the original creation of this fantasy setting.
Yeah.
um and it just grew from there, but it's kind of funny because I think about this thing that I hold dear to my heart so much and think, wow, this all came from Frozen fan fiction, didn't it?
Yeah, that's how, that's how folks, get started is they love something, they love a story, and they want to create something like it to evoke that. And I think at first, perhaps that's just sort of an exercise of entertaining yourself, perhaps as you're young, and
No,
probably why it's.
absolutely. Like
Yeah.
this is why I love fan art and I love like fan fiction. Like I feel like some professionals turn their nose up at like fan work because they think it less than original creations, but in my opinion, just knowing where I came from and where I started, for new artists, I feel like one of the hardest things is to keep motivation and to keep that inspiration and that drive and that passion to keep creating because art is one of those things where you just have to practice. You're not going to get better unless you practice. And practice can become monotonous and boring. And in my opinion, if drawing fan art is what keeps you going and keeps you practicing and keeps you creating, then do it because sometimes people need that hyperfixation or that one thing that they're just like super interested in. And if you need that to keep your interest in the art of creation, then by all means do it because I feel like art should be fun. And learning the basics is important, but for especially for early artists, young artists, I think fan fiction or fan art is very valuable to the learning process because I think it keeps people interested in creating stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of, I know my development a lot as a writer came from participating in like text role play in like these fandoms that I was a part of. And yeah, of course, you're tell us about your
I,
fandoms that you.
I did so much role playing. Most of it was Frozen, actually.
Uh-huh.
But before that, one of my hyperfixations that lasted literally 4 years was ancient Egypt. And this is so cringe. Like, just imagine someone who is hyperfixating on ancient Egypt, and I can guarantee you I was worse. But I was writing and role playing characters. From ancient Egypt with some just random people online.
Mm-hmm.
And I was super, super into that. And that's where I originally got my start in writing and writing
Mm-hmm.
prose and writing dialogue and all of that stuff was definitely from those role plays. But I also was a diehard Hunger Games fan. I was a
Oh, of
super
course.
fan. And I still actually love the Hunger Games. Like it is something that I've definitely mellowed out about. I still look at those books and those movies as something that was very important to me as a teenager and something that still inspires me now. And actually in college, like way after I, quote unquote, got over it, I gave my public speaking, I had a public speaking class, and my final for that class was a 10-minute presentation. We could present about anything. It had to be about like one of the four big topics that we are sort of learning about in class, like race, gender, sexuality, and ability and disability, I think were the four things that we were sort of studying in class, because the whole shtick was about how like there are people who are different from us and we need to learn how to communicate with people who are different from us in order to be effective communicators or something. It was a very good class. Loved my professor. Long story short, our final had to be, we could present about anything. It just had to be tied to one of those things. So my presentation was gender as performance in the Hunger Games. And it was really fun revisiting this thing that I loved when I was younger to actually give a fully academic analysis presentation about it and to, re-look at these characters and the source material. Which was really cool.
And I love, especially for young people, and I know I use this, either creative art or performance or writing or anything really that gives you the opportunity to explore other cultures and different perspectives, I think is incredibly valuable for young people, instead of staying within your own small microcosm of a community. I think is pretty important, especially for your development as a good human being. So from there, you took some jobs when you were in college. How'd you get your
Yes.
start in the industry? Was it there?
Yeah. So, I feel like a lot of people, I started taking off on Twitter because of discourse. Like
Uh-oh.
I tweeted a thread that I wrote, like literally I had just woken up and I just needed to vent, and I wrote a long thread about it was just me listing things that would make me as a queer trans person of color want to leave your D&D game, and I used your as
Oh.
sort of like a general your. Like these are just things that me as a multiple marginalized person make me uncomfortable and stuff that you should be aware of when running games. And it was mostly event posts, but I was listing like all of these things, and it took off. It was kind of that thing that like immediately it was just all sorts of tons of retweets. At that point on Twitter, you couldn't limit who can reply to you. That was not a
Oh
feature
yeah.
yet. So I just like tweeted that, got ready for class, went to class, and then on our like break, I checked my phone again and it was like blowing up, and I was like, whoa, what is happening right now? Um, and let's just say, I got a lot of people who followed me from that because they agreed and they saw me as someone that they valued my perspective on things. So I was gaining a lot of followers. Lots of trolls as well. Baby's first death threat. I got a couple of
Oh.
those. Lots of messages actually in my inbox that were incredibly cruel. Every slur imaginable, even the ones that aren't directed towards people of my marginalization. I was getting all of them, and I was like, "Come on, guys!" And at
Wow.
some point, like I mean, I was reading all of them because unfortunately, you had to read them in order to delete them. And so I was reading all of them just to delete and report them. And it was just kind of like at some point, I was just kind of like, come on, be more creative than that. I've heard that one already. Come on. And like it really sucks that I sort of I had already developed a really thick skin for that kind of thing because prior to Twitter I was on Instagram in high school, and by the end of high school I had gained 50,000 followers on Instagram, and I was doing sponsorships and like all of that stuff, and I would get recognized in public. It was really weird, and it did a number on my mental health as a teenager growing up, when I was heavily relying on affirmation from random strangers on the internet to affirm my self-worth, and that's stuff that I'm still unlearning now. But I had a thick skin from my experience on Instagram, so it was just kind of like more death threats. But like it definitely felt more personal, frustrating. But that's sort of how I started becoming known in the space. I think was from that. I met a lot of people who are still my friends now from that tweet, who found me through that tweet. And then I started getting more involved in the space, and I saw a application or interest form for the Unbreakable anthology, who were releasing their second volume. And Unbreakable, if you don't know what it is a anthology of books completely created, written, and illustrated by all Asian creators. The first volume was specifically for D&D 5th edition, and the second one was a whole bunch of different systems. I know there's Blades in the Dark. I'm pretty sure there's a D&D thing in there as well. But there's a lot of more systems represented in the second one, which was called Unbreakable Revolution, which is the one that I ended up doing illustrations for. And that was my first professional project. It is available on Drive-Thru RPG if you want to pick it up.
Yeah. From there, let's talk about your life is like as a freelancer now that you're out of college and how that was for a while. I know that you have other roles that we'll end up talking about, but like you were full-time freelancing for a while, right?
Yes. In the past year, 2022, I was a full-time freelancer. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, what was your schedule like? And if we're talking about if you feel comfortable enough to talk about like how is it do you get so much done as a freelancer in spite of, having ADHD and things like that? Like I would love to talk to you about that.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely a huge learning curve. Like I said, like learning to work with myself and finding methods that help me rather than hinder me. I've heard a lot of bad ADHD advice from neurotypical people. And it was sort of like me just having to like parse through and see what is actually useful and what is just neurotypical BS. My sort of thing is I'm sort of held to the whimsies of my brain. So whenever my brain decides, it's time to work, is when I get to work. And so getting that focus is sometimes a challenge. But I work typically all 7 days of the week, but I don't work for as long each day. Also, like I can be sitting at my desk and like quote unquote working, but like maybe about like half of that time is actually spent drawing. And then of course there's all the other things you have to do as a freelancer, because I tell this to artists who are interested in freelancing or want to know what it's like, and it's like you expect that freelance illustrating is going to be mostly drawing, but I would argue that like 40% of your time is spent doing emails, being your own social media person, marketing yourself online. Like all of those things are so important. Doing paperwork, sending out invoices, like all of this stuff that is decidedly not art, you still have to do, because unlike when you work for a company, you are your own boss, which is both a positive and a negative. And for me, I've had to develop lots of systems and organizational tips and tricks so that I can stay organized. I obviously use email as my primary form of communication because you can put labels on your emails, which helps me color code and organize things so that when I'm looking down my inbox, I can quickly see, that's what this is, or, can sort things, compartmentalize like what I need to focus on today. And then I use Trello to track for my individual projects. I'm not sponsored by any of these people, by the way, but I love Trello. Would highly recommend it.
A great service.
For,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
very
for
good. You can
project
color
management.
code and you can just update them like notepads or like color coding notepads, but digital, right?
Yeah, and it's very tactile too, because you can like drag things from different piles basically. So that lets me sort of like track where in the process for each of my ongoing projects. Because that's the other thing about freelancing is that I'm typically working on multiple things at a time. Especially in the way that I work, I rely on client feedback. And if clients don't get back to me in like a timely manner, where I will send them a work in progress and be like, "What do you think of this?" Or I'll send like 3 different color comps and be like, "Choose one." And then I'm waiting. Then I can't do anything else until they get back to me. So I usually try to juggle like 2 or 3 things at a time so that if I'm waiting on one client, I can be working on something else because time is money and I don't want to be held up by one client who's not getting back to me because they're just not checking their email for whatever reason. Like I don't want to be losing out on opportunities and stuff. So usually I'm juggling multiple things at a time. So Trello makes that really easy for me to sort of see like what I'm working on, what's on deck, etc. But yeah, so I'll typically like wake up at like 11 or something. Like I'm not a morning person, so I sleep in. And then I go downstairs, eat lunch and then come back up. And then I usually work in the afternoon, take a break for dinner. And then if I don't have like a stream, because I also do like actual play performance things, if I don't have a stream that night, I'll typically continue working or I will call it a day and decide to do something fun at night, like either like watching a TV show, watching a movie, playing games, hanging out with friends, what have you. But I get somewhere between, like anywhere between 2 to 6 hours of work in a day, sometimes more if I'm like really going on a project. But yeah, it really varies from day to day. And it also varies depending on how much work I have at the time, because with freelancing, it is it fluctuates a lot. Some days, some months you'll have a ton of work, other months will be slower. And that's definitely one of the biggest cons, I think, of freelancing is that it's not steady work and you constantly have to be online promoting yourself and being like, I'm available for work, hire me, you should hire me, like check out my work, check out my portfolio. And like, I feel so silly sometimes just constantly like screaming on the internet being like, look at my work. But like that's definitely something you have to get used to if you want to do freelancing is being comfortable with promoting yourself, promoting your work and knowing your worth and being like, yes, these are my rates. You can, hire me for these rates, or if you can't afford that, I'm willing to work with you to figure out a style that does fit your budget, or maybe I'm not the artist for you, and that's fine because there's tons of artists out there, and you're probably able to find someone who can work within the scope of your project that you're.
Speaking of freelancing and figuring out what to charge, how to promote yourself, I did want to ask you, for the artists who may be listening, how did you decide what your rate would be? Were you basing it on where you thought you were a while ago, or did someone give you a recommendation? Was there a resource you used? How did you come to that conclusion?
My professors in art school were very adamant about do not charge an hourly rate because as you get better at art, you'll get faster at art. And if you're charging an hourly rate as you get better, you end up losing money because a piece that would used to take you an hour, let's say your hourly rate is, I don't know, $50 an hour. You charge $50 for a piece that takes you an hour, and then 1 year later, that same client comes to you and is like, can I have another one of these, please? And you're like, okay, but you've gotten better in that year, and now that same piece takes you half an hour. So now the client only has to pay $25 for a better piece of art. And then the alternative for that is that, oh, you can just raise your rates. But then this client comes back and they're like, I want to hire you for that same thing. And you're like, oh, well, last year you paid $50 an hour, but now I charge $100 an hour. And then the client will be like, what? Why are you raising your rates? So I've just been told, do not charge an hourly. But to set your rates as a flat rate, you should be thinking about how much you want to be making hourly as an average for what you're charging. So, for example, my portraits that I do for like my character portraits, they take me about, it really depends actually on the character. Like really simple designs I could probably finish in 45 minutes. Some of the more complicated designs, or if there's a lot of back and forth with the client, will take me like 2 hours. But I've set that flat rate at $80. And that's sort of just the flat rate. Like these full color portraits, they start at 80. If you have more details or, complicated design or what have you, it will be more. And none of that includes my commercial licensing, which is, for me, is an additional 30% of the base price. And then if you're going to print it in something, that's another 30% on top of that. But that's basically how I set them. And then also every year you should be adjusting your rates. Your rates should get more expensive. At least adjust for inflation. So you can Google what the inflation rate is and raise your rates by that much if you want to keep them, quote unquote, the same. But you should be raising your rates each year because most artists improve with time. And as you get better, you should be charging your worth. And that's definitely something I advocate for all artists, because I see a lot of people charging under what I feel like they should be or could be, for how good their art is.
Yeah, I think it comes with the conundrum of, and I deal with similar situation as far as like pricing and availability for freelancing when I'm a professional GM. I could charge $15 per seat, right? I only have so much time in the day and I only have so much work I can complete. So regardless, I'm going to have the same amount of clients as my cap. You're going to have the same amount of art that you can produce on a weekly basis as a cap, right? So you might as well be making what, your career is progressing as you're getting better, to eventually put you in a position to where you're not going to be endangering yourself financially any longer. I think
Yeah.
that's the goal, right?
And here's the other thing too, is that like sometimes like artists will be like, I don't want to raise my rates because, I only do this for fun, or I do this as a hobby, and I have a full-time job that I make rent every month, and what have you. I do art for fun. So, I'm okay charging only $20 for this thing, or whatever. And I think people can charge what they want. But I would just argue that, clients aren't just paying for your time, they're paying for the years of practice that you've put in. They're paying for your experience. They're paying for, things that I don't even think you can quantify. Like when you hire me, you're not just hiring me to put pen to paper and to draw you a thing. Because I do a lot of visual research. I've done a lot of training, like as a character artist specifically. I have extensive training in portraiture, like formal life drawing portraiture, drawing from life, gesture sketches, life drawing, like all of that. Those are things that I specifically trained in and focused in on because I like drawing character portraits. And all of that training and all of that time put into the foundations allows me to bust out these portraits really quickly. Like if I were to sit down right now and have you just sit for me, I could probably sketch you in like 5 minutes and it will look like you. It'll be a sketch, but it will look like you. But you don't get that without years of practice. Like I've been doing art for like a decade now. And that's all that time and passion and all of that. Like that's what you pay for when you hire an artist, not just me, any artist.
You want to do my portrait? Let's talk about me. No, that'd be cool. Actually, I think I should hire you to do my portrait.
That'd be fun. Yeah, I do icons, like social media icons. I haven't done one in a while, but I do them, and they're very fun.
I would, yeah, I kind of need like an official, like, hey, this is my picture. Like, I don't know what to put it. I don't know what to say about it. My headshot. I don't really want like a camera headshot. I would like a piece of art though. So we'll talk about that off air. But like, yeah, we're going with that. We're gonna do it. We're gonna do it. As long as you have time. I don't want to impose, but as long as we can fit it in your schedule.
I have some
Okay.
really funky styles that I think you might like that don't take me very long and that are very unique, and I think you'll like them.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm looking forward to that conversation. Okay. So let's talk about Coyote and Crow. Yeah. Let's talk about working on the project, what it meant to you, and like as far as was it like a normal job for you or was it sort of different?
Coyote and Crow, first of all, if you haven't heard of it, Coyote and Crow is a really cool original game system, ideated and written by indigenous creators. They imagine a world in which North America was never colonized. And it's this really cool, like, science fiction fantasy, like, futuristic world without colonialism. And the visual aesthetic for the books, or for that setting, is really cool. And I was lucky enough to be one of, I believe, only 5 non-Indigenous artists who were asked to work on it. A majority of the team are all Indigenous folks. And if you look in the credits of the book, it's really cool because the Indigenous creators who worked on the book list their tribe affiliations with their credits, which is really, really cool. And there's been a lot of work within the Coyote and Crow team to get this book into the hands of Indigenous children across the country, which is really cool. Anyways, consider checking it out. It's a really cool book, and there's a lot of resources written into the text for non-Indigenous folks who want to play the game because, as the book says, like, they want non-Indigenous people to play this game, because I hear a lot of non-indigenous people, specifically white people, saying things like, I want to play this game, but like, what if I do it wrong? Or what if like, I feel weird playing this game where you play indigenous characters. Like, isn't that bad? And I know that the writer, the project manager and project lead, Connor Alexander, he's talked about this too. But he's like, literally, this book like holds your hand through it. There's several sections in the book where it's like, if you're indigenous, here's something you can do to like include your tribe, or specific traditions from your people and your culture, into this. Because the other thing is that everything in this book, they created a fictional tribe basically, for the book. They don't pull from any like IRL things directly, but they encourage indigenous folks who are playing the game to integrate their own tribe's culture into their characters and into the story. And so there's sections that'll be like, if you're indigenous, maybe do this. And then there's a whole section for if you're not indigenous, here are ways that you can, what's the word I'm looking for? Here are ways that you can interact with this content, even though you're not indigenous, like here are tropes to avoid. Here are things that, you can and cannot do or what have you. And like the book literally holds your hand through it. Like just play the game. It's a really cool system. But anyways, the project was really, really cool. I got to work with Connor and the specific writer. I am blanking on the writer's name, but I worked with both of them very closely in the creation of my work. And being non-Indigenous myself, both Connor and this other writer were very, very giving and gracious in helping me create the design for this character, because obviously I am not Indigenous and I want to be respectful of their culture, and they were both incredibly giving and were incredibly helpful in guiding me with their insight on the visual design for Dear Woman, which is the character that I did spot art for. It is on page 429 in the book. And so, every step of the way, every little design thing that I wanted to put into her design, I was, showing them and being like, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? Making sure to, pull from specific indigenous things instead of just generalization. One of the first notes that I got from them is that we are not doing brown. We're not putting them in brown, because that only reinforces what non-Indigenous people think Indigenous people look like. If you look at the art for the book, there's a ton of neon colors, bright colors, bold colors, and that was a specific decision from the creative leads for the visuals for the project. Was that they're like, we're not doing browns. We're not doing that. We're going to make this bold. We're going to make this, And so I got to create a really cool, like, sci-fi design for a traditional turkey feather fan, which is something that I was told and guided by the two of them for a specific prop that a Dear Woman can be holding. And so I got to create this really cool design for like a very futuristic version of that. It still has the turkey feathers, but the handle of it, bright sci-fi, like really cool. And the specific earrings that I have Dear Woman wearing in my illustration are the like porcupine quill earrings. But instead of like the porcupine quill like brown on the ends, it's like gold. So they look dipped in gold. And she's wearing a like black leather harness and this really cool like sci-fi dress with like cutouts, and like I had a lot of fun. And I definitely am very honored to be trusted with the subject matter by these two people. William Thompson is the other writer's name. But the entire project, Coyote and Crow, is really cool, and they're doing more things, not just the system guide, the book for like how to play. I got to work on another project which has not come out yet, so I can't say much about what I did, but I got to do more art for them, and I am still incredibly honored that not only did I get to work on the first thing, that Connor asked me back. And that was
That's a
very
good
nice.
sign. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's a good sign. That means that they probably like working with you. Yeah, that's dope. I love that. And I love we've kind of I guess brought this up twice now, like a safe exploration of different cultures. I think that's super cool.
Definitely
Um,
advocate for that. From the beginning, I've always said like the thing that inspires me and the thing that drives me to do what I do has been and has always been since high school to increase the positive representation of marginalized groups in media. And if there's anything I can do to do that, I will do. Because I believe that every person should be able to look in the media and see characters that look like them and who share their culture, who are not just the bad guys or not just a stereotype. Because bad representation, I think, is worse than no representation, because bad representation only perpetuates stereotypes and usually negative associations with certain marginalized groups. And I will always be an advocate for positive representation in everything.
Wonderful. I'm gonna go grab something off the shelf. So one moment.
Okay, cool. This is for Friday later. Do 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 do
What
do
page is your
do
art on in
do
Unkite
do
Goddesses?
do do do. Uh,
Pop quiz time.
I don't know. It was the Mistra art.
Okay.
My book is over there and behind a pile of stuff.
No, I got
But
it.
I
I got
did
it.
the
I didn't mean to cut you off. 119, right?
yes, that is me. And then if
Yeah,
you
yeah.
flip like 2 pages,
Uh-huh.
I did a piece of spot art. I think it's 2 pages. Nope, one more page. Flip one more page. Nope, flip one more page. Nope, one more. Yeah, that.
Yeah,
I
there
did
it is.
that
I
one.
recognize on your website. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so if you want to break open your Uncaged Goddesses book and look, pages 126 and 118. It's right before the A World Unbroken, A Woman Unchained by Amber Litkey and Sadie Lowry. Level 18
Yeah.
adventure, the goddess Mistra. Mistra? Mistra?
I think it's Mistra. I don't
Okay.
know. I've been saying Mistra at least.
Yeah, you can tell I didn't play
The
the old
goddess of
editions.
magic.
Yeah. What was it like working with this team and on this project? And how long did this take you? Because this is incredible art. So,
Thank you so much. Okay, so Uncaged Goddesses was a really cool project. I loved working with the whole team. It was honestly such a great experience. As far as that actual piece, I can check and I can tell you exactly how much time because I do all my work on Procreate and
oh,
Procreate
really?
actually tracks how long things take. So
That's useful.
let me go see. This piece was 16 hours.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah,
And that's
16
just
hours.
that's only like in the program with your brush, not research
Yeah.
time. How much
Yeah.
was your research time, you think?
I don't know. It was so long ago because this is one of the pieces that I got to turn in for class actually. Um,
Hmm.
it was for my I was taking a environments, props, and structures class, and as you can see, there is a little bit of an environment and a little bit of perspective, and I got to turn
Yeah.
this in for my final, and it was great.
Wow. Nice. Game in the
um,
system. Game in the
yep.
system. Got it.
Yep. But yeah, this piece was a joy to create. I got to work with Sadie and Amber, who were really cool to bounce ideas off of. Because the first thing I said to them was, "I am going to draw Mistra as a black woman," and I said like, "Is that okay?" Because even if they had said no, I still would have fought for it. But like, when I went to like the official like D&D descriptions of her, she's described as a woman with like thick dark black hair. That's not a white woman. That's not a white woman. And like every other art I saw of Mistra, she was either white with black hair or she was like racially ambiguously brown, right? Like she's like she could be spicy white like Italian or something, but like it was very like racially
Spicy
ambiguous.
white.
Yeah, spicy white.
Spicy white, like it's a zingy marinara, like damn, damn.
But I was like, I would love to see Mistra as a woman of color, specifically a black woman, because she's very, very powerful, and I thought that that representation would be really cool.
Yeah.
And they both were super for it, and I was like, hell yeah, let's go. And so I did a lot of research into various black protective hairstyles because she is described as having really long hair. And I was like, I could draw braids. Braids are really cool. But I also was like, I wonder what else is out there because there's so like the diversity of like black protective hairstyles. There's so much out there. So I ended up on Senegalese twists, which is what I drew for her hair, and I looked up a crap ton of reference for how these twists look in hair. And this specific hairstyle, I actually found a reference of someone who had a very similar, had the twist, but then also like twisted the twists away from her face and put it up in an updo. I looked up reference for the edges because Mistra's edges are laid down in like little S curves. And I also collaborated with some of the other artists on the project who were making other depictions of Mistra, because there's like a divider image of Mistra, which her design is completely different. But in that art of Mistra, there's different symbols representing the 8 schools of magic. And so, and I don't know if those symbols were official or not, but I saw that artist did that. And I was like, that's cool. I'm going to take the symbols that you drew and put them as tattoos on my Mistra's arm to sort of like unify those two together. Because Mistra's the goddess of magic, like illusion, what have you. She could have many forms. But I put 4 of the 8 schools of magic on one of her biceps, and then it's sort of insinuated that the other 4 are on the other arm, although they're not seen.
Dope.
And I had a really fun time working on this piece. It was very line art heavy. Actually inking the twists in her hair took the longest time because I drew those by hand. There are brushes that exist to draw these kinds of very repetitive shapes, but I drew them all by hand, and that was something that I knew that I wanted to do, because I knew that the hair was going to be difficult, but I wanted to, pay homage to it and do it well and do it right. And I will say the art in the book printed really dark. The piece definitely looks better on my website in the digital form. So highly recommend going to look on it on my website, naladraws.com.
Yeah, we'll
Because
include show notes description for you.
prints so poorly. That was the other thing, is that like I used a lot of purple in this art, and unfortunately the color purple is so difficult to print. It's so hard to get purple to look right in print, which is
Oh,
incredibly
it is.
sad.
Yeah, it is a lot more colorful digitally.
Yeah.
That is
Purple
a stark difference.
purple
Yeah.
is so frustrating to work with. But I knew I wanted it to be purple. Even though I was like, ugh, this is not going to print well.
Yeah. It still looks incredible. It's just the printed version from what I have in my hands, and this might be like a printer issue with like because it is a DM's Guild product. It's not like the team was able to really choose who they got. You know what I mean? Like kind of
Yeah.
limited in that respect. So
And also on-demand printing usually isn't as high quality as
yeah.
a not on-demand printing.
Absolutely, yeah. But it still looks fantastic, and
Thank you so much.
the digital form is just also just stunning. You just get to see a bit more of the color, especially the purple, if you go look at the digital. Yeah, I don't see much representation in those TTRPG books, unfortunately, for people of color. I knew that was
I
something that
will
we wanted
always
to move forward
advocate
with.
for more. And like
Yeah.
when I get hired, I will usually try to pitch whatever I'm drawing as people of color when I can and where I can. And I will sometimes ask clients who aren't fully settled on their character designs, like if I get a pitch or like an art brief and they're describing characters or whatever, I might ask them, does this character have to be white, or could I draw them as a person of color? And usually how I ask that is like, is it important that this character be white? And usually the answer is no. Usually they just default to white because everyone defaults to white. But I will always challenge that and just say, like, have you considered why? Like, is it really that important to you? Or, because if the character's ethnicity is not important to the character themselves, like, why not draw them as a person of color? And yeah, that's something I try to do to help increase representation in whatever I paint. I got to do 2 pieces really recently for version 4 of the combat wheelchair that Sarah's putting out, Mustang's art, plural, on Twitter. They hired me to do 2 illustrations for a new character class that they wrote, and they pretty much were like, just illustrate two characters, some combination of like the schools of magic that they created, and two of the different mutations. So I drew a satyr and a werewolf. It was actually the first werewolf I ever drew. Her only other instruction to me as the character designer was both the characters have to be disabled in some way, but other than that, you can draw whatever the heck you want. The werewolf character who was the school of biomancy, I think is how you say it. She is this like really big, strong, buff, fat woman who is a double amputee, one above the knee, one below the knee, and I drew her with prosthetic blades, like the prosthetic legs that athletes use, in usually for like track and field kind of things. They're definitely more active than a typical like walking leg. So I did a lot of research into what those prosthetics look like, and also the difference between above the knee and below the knee amputees. And so I got to draw this really badass woman who, is tying up her hair, getting ready to fight, and she's a werewolf, so she's very hairy. And then the other character is a school of oneromancy. I actually don't know how to say this word. And he's a satyr, and I specifically designed him to be transmask. He has top surgery scars, and he is blind and has this like fantasy guide dog. And I say dog in quotes because this dog has 4 eyes and like 4 ears and a bright blue tongue. And it was very fun to design like what a fantasy guide dog might be, balancing both like things that exist in the real world, like the actual design of the harness that he holds on to is pretty much lifted exactly from our real life, because it was important to me that there are things about his disability that are recognizable and tangible from our world. But then fantastical elements like the actual, like, it's almost like a saddle on the dog's back that, has like pouches attached to it that a fantasy character could store more fantastical items. And then, of course, the satyr, I mean, he's a satyr, but he's also holding the cane that some blind folks use to detect the world around them. So, and his eyes are glowing bright white, because whatever that O word is, oneromancy or something, has to do with dreams. And so I thought about like how cool it would be to have like almost an oracle-esque vibe for this character, very fey, very sort of that aesthetic with a very fey looking by his side. And the design and the intentionality for these designs was really important to me, to make that representation and get these characters in. And I also had a lot of fun because I've never drawn a dog before, and I've never drawn a werewolf, so it was a lot of firsts for me. So I had a lot of fun with that project.
Yeah, I think me being a project manager, project lead for a book has really been a dream come true, in that when I'm working with artists, it's really fantastic and wonderful, and it feels like such a blessing. It's like I was talking to someone about this on the podcast, and saying how addictive it is just being in these creative projects and like seeing people's interpretation of what you would like to do. Is this the drawing?
Yes,
It
I
is.
just
Okay.
messaged you the
Wow.
art. Thank you so much.
I love this. Okay. This is public, right?
Yes,
I can link it. All right. It'll be in the show
yes,
notes if you
absolutely.
want to take a look at it. That's for the listeners. You want to take a look to this wonderful picture is in the show notes. I love it. Is that something that people can buy right now, or are we still waiting on this?
I think we're still waiting on it, and with the whole like OGL thing, I don't know what Sarah's
Right.
status on that is.
Okay, yeah, gotcha. Yeah, we don't have to talk about OGL. It is January 11th as of this recording, but this episode might not drop until like March. But yeah. Okay. And did you want to, let's shift to talk about you being an art director
Yeah, of
and how
course.
that's different and how you got involved with that, and what your experience has been like thus far as an art director.
Yeah. So when I was in art school, way back when, uh, I during class crits, I would always give feedback to my peers because that's what you're supposed to do. But more often than not, people would just not say anything, which is like fine or whatever. But I would always offer feedback because I know that the crit process is really invaluable to art. And I was told often by my professors and my peers, like, oh, you'd make a really good art director. Like, you give really good feedback. And I was kind of like, oh, what's an art director? Like, I don't know what that is. Like, what does that mean? Like, I had a like vague idea of what art directing was, but I didn't really know. And I sat down with one of my professors one day and I was like, hey, like, what actually goes into art directing? Because this particular professor had been an art director in the past. And so I was like, hey, like, what actually is art direction? Because people keep saying that I should do this thing, and I don't really know what it is. Because art direction also varies heavily depending on what industry you're in. Because, like, an art director for advertising is so different from art direction for games, for example. Those titles mean very different things. And so I was asking him, like, hey, like, what does this really mean? What does that do? And so he explained to me the basics of being an art director. And I was like, wow, that actually sounds like something I'd be really good at, because he was telling me that, like, good art directors have a really good eye for art. They have a really good eye for aesthetics. They are good, strong communicators, are able to give and receive feedback that is constructive. And not only that, you have to have very good people skills, very good organizational skills. And because it's a leadership position, you have to have good leadership skills to be able to lead a team. And generally, an art director is the person who creates and curates the visual style of whatever the heck you're working on, be it an animated film or a magazine, a book, or in my case, tabletop RPGs. Art directors are typically the ones who create the style guide for all of the artists. Sometimes, not always, they're the ones who are actually hiring the artists, going through applications, picking the people they want to work on the team, creating the style guide, and then making art briefs and assigning artists specific things. And in doing that, you weigh your artist's strengths and weaknesses, because an art director should be able to look at a portfolio and be like, oh, this artist is really strong at drawing this one thing and maybe not so strong at drawing this other thing. So when I'm assigning my briefs, I'm going to assign them stuff that they're good at so that they can produce the best work they can. And then you go through the whole crit back and forth process with the artists, giving like, there's usually daily feedback cycles depending on how quickly the artists are getting stuff back to you, and basically helping to guide the artists to stay in line with the style guide and to keep, this is especially important if you have multiple artists working on the same thing, making sure that all of the work is cohesive together and is meeting the visual aesthetic that the art director, creative director, and project leads are kind of going for. And in my specific stead as art director, it's a lot of organizational stuff and just serving as a liaison between like all these different teams. When I was working for Games Unbound as art director for the Rumor Brokers Ledger of Names, as I was working with my team of artists, they were designing they were doing character portraits for the NPCs that the writers are writing. And so I was basically serving as the middleman. As the artist sent me like work in progresses, I would, give my feedback, but then I'd be sending it to the project leads, sending it to the writers who actually wrote that character for feedback. I'd be sending to the sensitivity consultants, and I'd take all of those people's feedback and boil it down and then send feedback back to the artist and be like, okay, here's what the team is thinking. And so it was a lot of like organizing all of that and tracking to make sure every artist was, on track to finish by the deadlines, and just working with everyone no matter what their individual situations were for various like health and personal issues. Obviously, you pad into the timeline, like buffer time in case stuff comes up, because in the wise words of my father, always plan for failure. That's something that I learned as a child. And it does sound quite pessimistic, but that is some of the best advice I've ever received. Because if you go into everything thinking that you're going to fail, you will be more prepared if you do actually fail, because you thought of that and you expected that. So yeah, always plan for failure. But yeah, I really enjoy art directing. I got the position at Games Unbound after, I think, one of the summer conventions I was at, maybe Gen Con, maybe one of the PAXs. I don't know what convention it was, but I met the project lead after that convention and we talked very briefly. And then over the summer, we started talking about the project, because originally he wanted to hire me on as an artist. And I was like, yeah, cool. And then I was like, do you have an art director? And he was like, no. And I was like, do you want an art director? And he was like, I would love to hire you as an art director. And I was like, cool. And then like inside I was sweating because I was like, everyone has told me, including my professor, you don't really normally get to be an art director until like 5 to 10 years into your career. Like it is a senior management position. And I was fully ready to, do my time and wait and eventually become an art director. But I was able to get experience doing it this soon, quote unquote, after graduating. And I fell in love with it. I really, really love art directing. And I know that this is the thing that I want to be doing. And now that the Games Unbound contract has ended, I am now art directing for All the Witches. So I'm very excited for that.
Fantastic. And we're still on sort of like we're not sure about timelines on that, so we don't necessarily have to talk about that. What has been something that you learned as an art director as opposed to that you didn't know even leading up to becoming an art director? What's something that surprised you about being an art director once you became that?
I think like I very quickly learned about project management skills and organization because I definitely struggle with organization as someone with ADHD. But I very quickly learned that spreadsheets and color coding are my best friends. And something that I definitely could be seen as a pro or a con is that I tend to over communicate about things. I want it to be very clear in the application because I put out an open call for artists for Games Unbound. I got about 300 applications, so I had to look through all of those, look through all these portfolios, and I could only hire 10 people out of this pool of almost 300 people that applied, which was overwhelming and it was a lot. But color coding and all of that made it easier for me to sort through all of that stuff. And then once I had my team tracking progress and all of that stuff, I think like I very quickly learned organizational tips and tricks and tools for that sort of communication. And also learning with each individual person that I was working with on the team, like their preferred communication style and how to best give them feedback that they can create the best art that they can. And I'm sort of getting across all the things I need to get across. But each artist takes things differently. And so it was like kind of a trial and error, working with all these different personalities and all these different artists, and seeing like this one artist like really, really thought draw overs were really useful and really helpful. And they specifically told me that and was like, I love draw overs. They really help me. So I was like, all right, cool. I'll give you draw overs. So I would do that. Other artists didn't find them as helpful. So I had to be more descriptive or what have you. Some artists liked when I sent specific color swatches or, blah, 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 blah. So that's another thing is like when you're leading a team of many different artists who are from like all over the world too. So it was kind of like I could tell when each of the artists were working because all throughout my day, it like around lunchtime, I'd get some messages. Around dinner time, I'd get some messages. At 3 a.m. my time, I'd get some messages. So I'd wake up to messages from artists with updates and whatnot. And so it was a lot of organization on my end to juggle all of these incoming messages because we created 50 art assets within the course of a couple months. And so that was a lot of back and forth with everybody.
Wow, 50. Oh, damn.
50 portraits.
Damn. Okay.
Booyah.
Damn. Okay. I see the spreadsheet growing in my mind right now.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like, oh,
Oh,
and
yeah.
how many are probably in different stages at any given time and like,
I
wow.
learned how to program the little check boxes. So you check a box and then that whole square turns a color. So then I can
Uh-huh.
like visually see, but then also I can like check it
Um,
off as people progress on their stuff. It was also kind of funny because like I got to be my own art director because I also did two of the pieces in the book.
okay.
So it was kind of funny because I was just like, oh, like I'm gonna get mine done super early so I can just be done with mine and then just focus on the art directing aspect. So it was kind of funny because yeah, for that project, I was the art director. I was also one of the artists, and I wrote an NPC for the book as well. And yeah, that was like the other thing too, like specifically with that project, assigning each artist which NPCs they were drawing was this beautiful Tetris puzzle that worked out perfectly.
Yeah.
And that was really nice. But I was just trying the whole time to be upfront, maybe over communicating on my end just to be sure that like everyone was on the same page, because I'd rather over communicate than communicate poorly, because I've worked on lots of projects and, communication styles vary greatly. Communication will make or break a project, because if there's poor communication amongst project leads or from lead to the like contract worker or what have you, poor communication will tank a project. So I knew that I had to be on it, and to over communicating is better than not. So that was sort of my communication style, because I want to be as clear as possible and as upfront as possible, so that the artist isn't surprised by anything, and so that I know that I've got my bases covered, and that I know and that I understand and know that they know what I mean, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah, it does. I have these sort of discussions as the co-creator of the Vineyard and working on this project. I have the great pleasure and honor of working with Able for this project, and their narrative design experience has really been key to me understanding how to communicate with people in order to get what we need as far as written material. And Elaine Ho is our art director.
Oh, I love her.
Yeah, and Elaine is. I hope they don't take offense by me saying this, but Elaine is a business bitch, and I fucking love that. So I'm all about that. And Elaine is like, knows what they're talking about, and will just be very concise, communicate really well, and that's what I'm looking for genuinely, and exactly why I hired Elaine, because as a project lead, I don't have time to do the art director job. That's why I hired someone. So I just need someone to own that space. And I just check
Mhm.
in once in a while and be like, that's pretty cool art. I love that.
Yeah. Looks cool. I
Yeah,
know,
looks
cuz like
great.
that's my pitch for project managers, because like I also do art consultation. That's something I offer project managers, like even if you don't end up wanting or needing an art director, what I'm willing to do for people is sit down with project managers and say, okay, like I can sit down and talk to you about your art. And because you tell me what the scope of your project is, you tell me sort of how much art do you want, what style are you looking for, and I'll be able to help you estimate how much you need to budget for art. Because I can be like, here is about what, here's a range for what people might charge for that. And then you should also make sure, see, for commercial licensing, like what you're looking for, so I can tell you how much you can expect to pay for this. And then through the art consultations, I can help guide you towards like, oh, if this is your budget, here's the kind of art that you can expect to get from that. Or like if you have endless pockets or whatever, you can tell me what you want and I can tell you how much that might cost you. And I think that's incredibly useful for project managers, especially people who have no experience working with or talking to artists, who have no idea what art costs, because usually people who haven't interacted with artists or hired artists before usually but not always are very off in terms of how much they think things are going to cost. And so I can really help like ground that and be like, okay, if this is what you're looking for, here's how much you can expect to pay. And whether or not you end
Absolutely.
up hiring me to do art direction or to be the person that handles all of that, that's something I'm willing to sit down and have a consultation meeting with. And it for an hour of my time, I think my rates at the moment start around $60. So like for $60, I can tell you how much your art's going to cost for an hour of my time. And that's something that I offer that I feel like people don't even think to look at that, because the worst thing that can happen to a project manager is for them to have like this whole idea for the project, and they kickstart it and they have their money, and then they're like, okay, I want to go hire artists and I have $500 to do that, and here's all the art I want. And then you contact an artist and they're like, how much are your rates? And the artist is like, well, if you want cover art, that's going to be $800. And then you're like, well, shit. And so something I can do is help people prepare and figure out, how much is stuff going to cost.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually how my relationship with Amiable started, was because I was looking at developing my writing and my campaigns a little bit better. So I just hired him they were a freelancer at the time. They were interested in doing like freelance narrative consulting. I just hired him for like 6 hours or however much it was. And we started our working relationship that way, so that when we ended up connecting much later on for different projects, I think I applied to a job with Hedger Group as their marketer for One Night Strahd. And that was how we ended up reconnecting, because we had like a good working relationship from that. And honestly, I hate to say like you need money to get into the industry, but like if you're running your own project, then I do recommend what you do is you work to save up money, you squirrel that away, and then you hire someone who has experience. Just it'll save you so much trouble just to get a consultation, just to get some help and point you in the right direction so that you understand what it is that you're doing rather than beating your head against a wall. Why not hire someone for, $100 today, but it's going to save you hours and hours and so much anxiety and stress to just have a professional tell you, like, this is what I advise.
Exactly, yeah. And like also project manager is like a very specific job. And creative lead, I think a lot of people who are project leads, what they really want to be is a creative director, because project lead is a very specific job that requires a very specific skill set, and not everyone is cut out to be a project lead, and that's okay. Or project manager, sorry. And that's okay to like just quote unquote just be a creative director, and you can hire someone who can manage everyone and can keep everyone on track and can do all of those skills that require really good communication and really good organization. Because let's face it, not everyone wants to do that, not everyone's good at that, but if you want to have a successful project, having a successful and capable project manager is so important. And I feel like some people need to realize that they might not be cut out for that, and that's okay. But you can hire someone to be your project manager who has experience doing that, and you can be creative director, and that's fine, and that's perfectly okay. And then everybody gets what they want, and your project will be more successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I'm looking at my own art budget, which is what Elaine put together for me. I'm just like, a lot of the time I end up, and this is just maybe something I need to work on probably, but having that other person to communicate with and work with is genuinely just so valuable, because I can just go ask Elaine and be like, what do you think about this? And they will give me a professional, well thought out, experience-based answer. And that's better than me spending hours and hours or days trying to research something to come up with a decent answer. I'd rather just work with someone who's an expert. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, well, Nala, what would you like to talk about before we sign off? Do you have anything in particular that you'd like to talk about?
Yes, I do. Thank you, first of all, so much for having me on the show. I have been Nala J. Wu. My pronouns are they, them, and I am on Twitter at Nala Wu and at Nala Draws if you want to see my art. I am also at Nala Draws on any other social media that I have, including TikTok, itch.io for games and character sheets and that kind of thing. If you're interested in seeing my portfolio and or hiring me, interested in getting me on your projects, my portfolio can be found on knowledgedraws.com. Any inquiries can be sent to knowledgedraws@gmail.com. Besides art and art direction, I also am a voice actor, sensitivity consultant, and a TTRPG actual play stream performer. I am currently on a longer running show called Itaewon by Night. We are the first and only all-Asian cast playing Vampire the Masquerade on stream. We air on Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. over on Bad House RPG. If you want to get caught up, our first season VODs are posted on YouTube. If you search Itaewon by Night, it is on Going Crit RPG's channel. The second show I would love to plug is The Mysteries of Ravenswood. We are an all-trans cast playing Kids on Brooms for Pride Month, and we are airing Monday nights at 7 p.m. over on Queen's Court Games. The last thing I would love to plug is that I'm currently the art director for All the Witches. All the Witches, if you haven't heard of it, is an original tabletop role-playing game system and setting featuring witches in a fantasy land where you can learn magic from your covens or schools, you travel the world, and you can help those who have fallen under the influence of a dark magic in the world called discordance. Come check us out on Twitter, allthewitches_, and I'm super excited to be bringing this game to life as art director, and I cannot wait for you all to see what we are working on. The team is full of super, super diverse BIPOC and queer creators, and I'm so excited. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me. Again, best places to follow me and keep up with all the stuff that I am doing is on my Twitter at NalaWoo. And I am super excited for this summer. There's a lot of really cool stuff happening. So yes, follow me on there. And again, thank you so much for having me on this podcast.